Welcome aboard on our journey on the Llangollen Railway. We're travelling aboard a Class 5101 large prairie of Great Western Railway for our journey of a little over 10 miles. We start at the railway's headquarters in the pretty town of Llangollen and travel west along the banks of the River Dee to Berwyn, past Deeside Halt to Glyndifrdwy, Carrog and Corwen East, before reversing to Carrog and running around the carriages in preparation for the return. And so we get underway from Platform 1 at Llangollen for our journey through this beautiful corner of Wales. As we depart, it's difficult not to be impressed by the length of the platforms here. And at the western end there's a ramp which was designed to allow for ease of access for the Eisteddfod crowds who flock here during the second week of July. The River Dee is just out of sight to our left at the moment, and it'll never be far away, a constant companion for the length of our journey. We'll cross it just once in 3 minutes' time as we pass by Pentrefellyn sidings. Above us to the right are the sidings of the Llangollen loco shed and the original goods station. The popularity of this line is obvious from records of ticket sales. In 1903, more than 88,000 tickets were sold at the station, but within 30 years the numbers had dwindled to less than a quarter. Similar declines were seen with goods traffic, with over 7,300 tons of coal and coke arriving in 1903, falling to less than 3,000 tons by the early 1930s. We're beginning to pick up speed now, and the River Dee makes its first appearance on the left, flowing in the opposite direction to us. It's 70 miles in length from its source in the mountains of Snowdonia, flowing through Llangollen and Chester to enter the Irish Sea at the Dee estuary to the southwest of Liverpool. We pass through the Llangollen Goods Junction and its signal box is just ahead on the left. When work began to bring the Llangollen Railway back to life, only the base of the box remained. When it was recommissioned in 1989, it used the frame from Rwabham Middle and much of the timber came from Green Lane Crossing in Saltney. The loco shed behind us is an important part of this railway, and an important part of the future of heritage railways in general. There are 4 new builds underway, creating brand new steam locomotives based on original designs. The Great Western Grange class is having an 81st locomotive built. 6880 will bring the class back to life after all the surviving engines were destroyed by the cutter's torch. The LMS Patriot class is also being worked on, using the original parallel boiler designed by Sir Henry Fowler. The third masterpiece is a Class 47 a Great Western, nicknamed the Night Owl for its overnight work. Only 9 were built, and 4709 will see this iconic 280 in action again. And the final new build is a B-17 Sandringham 460. 73 were built for the London and North Eastern Railway, designed by Sir Nigel Gresley, also responsible for the Flying Scotsman and the Mallard. We pass the Pentrefellyn sidings and cross the River Dee for the only time on our journey. From here to the destination it'll remain close by on the right. Pentrefellyn originally gave access to a wharf on the Llangollen Canal, which is out of sight to the right in the trees. There was also access to the Pentrefellyn Slate Works. Today, the sidings have been extended by the Llangollen Railway and provide an area for the storage, repair and maintenance of rolling stock. Our first station is 2 minutes ahead at Berwyn. Once we complete this long, almost 135-degree turn inside a bend of the River Dee, there's a short straight before the station on a shallow curve to the right. By then we'll have climbed 100 feet from our starting point, but there's a greater challenge beyond. The Dee turns north, entering a long horseshoe loop. But rather than follow it, we take a shortcut through the nearly 700-yard-long Berwyn Tunnel. Before we reach Berwyn, let's take a moment to talk more about the locomotive we're riding on. As we've heard, 5199 is a large prairie, a 262 designed by Charles Collett, chief engineer of the Great Western Railway from 1922. He developed it from his predecessor George Churchward's design for the 3100 class, which dates back to 1903. 209 were built by Great Western and British Rail, with 5199 coming into service in 1934. She worked predominantly around the West Midlands through most of her life, before being taken out of service in 1963. She was saved from the scrapyard and bought by a preservation society in 1985. There followed a somewhat checkered period of restoration, but finally she returned to service in 2003. In 2014, the locomotive completed a 10-year overhaul and presents a magnificent sight for us on the Llangollen Railway today. We've arrived at our first stop at Berwyn, and the view from the viaduct is impressive. At the downstream end of the Chain Bridge Hotel is the bridge the hotel is named after. It was reopened for use at the end of May 2015, following a 30-year period of closure. There's been a suspension bridge on the site since 1817, and it was originally built to transport coal, lime and iron across the Dee from the canal to the A5 road. Looking forwards, we can see the King's Bridge over the river below to the right. This four-arch bridge was built in 1901 to commemorate the coronation of King Edward VII. Less obvious is a feature of the platform at Berwyn Station. It's a very challenging site for a station to be built, sandwiched between Thomas Telford's A5 to the left and the River Dee far below on the right. But when the chairman of the Llangollen Railway, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Tottenham, demanded that something be done, few would argue. As traffic began to grow, the trains became longer, and the platform at Berwyn was found to be too short. So an extension was built, cantilevered from the viaduct's edge, and that is how it remains to this day. As we leave Berwyn, something significant is happening on the river unseen to the right. Ahead, we're heading for Berwyn Tunnel to avoid the long horseshoe of the river. Horseshoe Falls is a man-made weir which diverts water into the start of the Llangollen Canal. The waterway was a part of a system originally designed to carry boats from the Mersey to the Severn, but increasing costs and competition from the railways meant it was never completed as planned. We're climbing hard, and between here and the far end of Berwyn Tunnel, we'll have made another 80 feet. The gradient beneath Berwyn Mountain is around 1 in 75, and there's a constant curve which prevents us from seeing the light at the far end until quite late on. Above us, the A5 will cross the line twice as it loops around the hillside. We're presently running along a shelf created to allow the track to climb towards the east portal. And on the right we can see Coed Grisgog, the reason the river has been forced into a horseshoe-shaped path here over the centuries. Carving a standard gauge railway through the Welsh mountains was not an easy task, and there was a number of proposals for different lines. They came rather late in the day, as the country battled with an economic downturn following the mania of railway building, which led to many company failures and the subsequent loss of investments. But in August 1859, the Vale of Llangollen Railway received royal assent. The line opened for freight in December 1861 and to passengers the following June, with services provided by the Great Western Railway. Meanwhile, an additional section, the one we're travelling on now from Llangollen to Corwen, had been given the go-ahead in 1860. The major impediment to its construction was Berwyn Mountain, and the navvies of the time were forced to tunnel beneath it to reach their destination. It's more claustrophobic than most, with tight clearances and no ventilation shafts. But by 1865 the line had opened, and work was continuing to extend westwards to the coast. Before the end of the decade the work was complete, although it took until 1896 before all of the various companies involved were amalgamated and brought under the control of the Great Western. The Western Portal finally comes into sight as we pass under the A5 road for the second time, and suddenly we're out of the darkness and back into the bright light of day. The gradient has now eased and the driver pulls back on the power, allowing 5199 some respite from the climb. The river has rejoined us and we can glimpse it occasionally down to the right through the trees. Our next station is at Deeside Halt in about 3 minutes, though we won't be stopping there, with Glyndefrdwy another 5 minutes beyond. Between here and there, the river again provides a reference point for our route as we follow a series of long curves. The first to the right is approaching now. We then work our way around Pennygarth in a long curve to the left, before an S-bend leads us into Glyndefrdwy. We're a minute out from Deeside Halt. Today it's a request stop, and only when travelling westwards. Eastbound trains pass on the opposite side of the loop where there's no platform, so passengers using Deeside Halt need to plan a slightly complicated route to take this into account. For a time until 1992, the halt was as far as the restored railway extended, and the loop was used as a runaround for the locomotive. There's a small 3-carriage platform which allowed passengers to dismount and watch the operation. The loop signal box comes into sight on the left. It was rebuilt from the ground up when the railway was brought back to life, and the beautiful brick building is a testament to the skills of those involved in the hard work. The loop here was originally built to break up the long section between Llangollen and Glyndefrdwy. It could accommodate 45 standard wagons on the upside of the track, and the 18-lever signal box could be switched out overnight. By 1956, just one pair of trains a week was scheduled to cross here: the 12:30 Birkenhead to Barmouth and the 11:10 from Pwllheli to Birmingham Snow Hill. The regulator is opened again and we begin to accelerate. The gradient is a much shallower 1 in 156 here, and as we get closer to Glyndefrdwy, we'll encounter a 1 in 80 descent. Just short of the station there was a tramway which ran off to the left. The Deeside Tramway brought slate down from mines to the south. Built in the 1850s, it originally operated from the Deeside Slate Quarry and Nantipandy Slate Mill down to a shipping wharf on the A5. During the 1870s, the line was extended in 2 directions: southwards towards the Moel Verna slate mine and northwards to connect with the Llangollen Railway, bringing the total length to 3 miles. The original rails, laid on a 2-foot 6-inch gauge, were wooden with an iron running surface, while the extensions were laid with traditional iron rails. This mix of track remained in place until the tramway's closure shortly after the Second World War. It's a sadness that such an important part of the area's industrial heritage has been lost. Wales has a huge collection of preserved narrow-gauge railways, and it would be a fitting memorial to those who built the Deeside Tramway and worked the quarry and mine to see it being brought back to life. But that's a task for a future generation. In the meantime, the memories of the bygone era remain silent, perhaps to be reawoken decades from now. The same can't be said, thankfully, for the Llangollen Railway. Some would describe the removal of tracks so quickly after closure as an act of vandalism. But for many lines, once British Rail had acted, there was no turning back. In contrast, individuals and companies have shown enormous dedication and kindness over the years to ensure that the Llangollen Railway could come back to life. In 1972, the Flint and Deeside Railway Preservation Society was formed, and the search began for a suitable line to restore. Initially, attention focused on the Prestatyn area, but before long, all eyes turned towards Llangollen. The local council was very helpful and granted a lease on the station building. They reasoned that a heritage railway could only work in the interests of the town by attracting tourism. The station reopened in 1975, and the volunteers were proud of the 60 feet of track they'd laid. It may not have been much, but it was something to build from. The driver shuts the regulator and the locomotive begins to coast. It's a sign that Glyndefordwy station is not far off. We enter the S-bend that will take us to the platform. There's a lot to see ahead in a short space of time, so let's get prepared before we get there. Glyndefordwy had a tiny population, measured at just 199 in 1901. But it was an important place on this line, being the spot where slate from the nearby quarry and mine were loaded for transshipment. There were good sidings on the east side of the station, and we'll pass by them in just a moment. The tramway to the source of the slate curved off to the left at the sidings, and a 3-ton crane was used for the heavy lifting. The signal box comes into sight on the right. It controls the sidings and the level crossing gates at the road we pass over on the approach. The main station buildings were originally on the down platform, the one we'll be using, and consisted of a ticket office, general and ladies' waiting rooms, toilets, and the station master's house. Following closure of the line, these passed into private hands, and the situation has now been reversed, with a larger building on the up platform on the right and a basic waiting area on our left.